as it's the final day of the transfer window, I'm joined by David Ornstein, a football journalist who has become one of the most recognised, trusted and respected journalists for transfer news. We've been waiting for you to conclude some of your stories. What's been going on this morning?
Yeah, we've had to delay a little bit because it's been a hectic start to the day, a flurry of activity that only the final week of the window can dish up. And it's that Man United, at the time of recording, have got their agreement in place finally with Paris Saint-Germain to sign Manuel Ugarte as their first choice midfielder. So he's travelling over to Manchester, not far from where I'm speaking to you now, actually, and he will undergo his medical and then be confirmed, all being well, as a Man United player. The deal is worth 50 million euros plus 10 million euros in add-ons. PSG initially wanted a fixed 60 million euros, so Man United will feel that they've done well there to get him for below the sort of their impression of the asking price. PSG taking a 10% share of any future sell-on. And in tandem, Scott McTominay is advancing in his departure from Manchester United. So he's expected to travel to Italy today to complete a proposed move to Napoli for £25 million, sort of around 30 million euros. And that will be really important for Man United on this lovable phrase, PSR, FFP, financial fair play. It will allow them to balance the books. And in and amongst that, there's all sorts of other bits going on. Eddie Nketiah edging towards a move to Crystal Palace from Arsenal. Will Marc Guéhi finally make that move from Crystal Palace to Newcastle United? What are Chelsea going to do before this deadline? Tons going on, but it's actually hit a lull just as we've come on this recording. So you're my lucky charm.
Well, let's hope so. Or you might get a story as we're talking in this possible episode. You started out, you wanted to be a footballer yourself, didn't you?
Yeah, that's right. Trying to follow in your footsteps. Ironically or coincidentally or shamefully, you tell me which, I used to get chased around the playground at my first school. My ears were quite notable.
Oh, right. That's something we do have in common there.
And they called me Gary Lineker.
No way.
In like games of Kiss Chase. So I don't know if that was replicating your sort of experiences. But
did you take that as a compliment or an insult?
At the time, I don't want to massage your ego, but actually I do just have to take a call now.
Oh, wow.
Let me listen to this and I'll be straight back on. Okay, sorry about that, Gary.
No problem at all. We were interrupted there. That lull didn't last for very long. I was lip reading though, David. I was lip reading. I'm sure I saw you say something like, Lamine Yamal confirmed to sign for Leicester City. Was I right or wrong?
It's a done deal. You heard it here first. And the fact that this goes out on Friday, Gary, means it could well be the transfer that just never materialised.
Yeah, I think that's probably the case. What can you let us know a bit of insight into that call? Huh?
That was on Eddie Nketiah. I think it's progressing towards a conclusion to Crystal Palace. I think it's going to be a £30 million deal. It's not done yet. He obviously has to do his medical, etc. But that was indicating that things are moving in the right direction. You're always a bit reticent because, I mean, as you've pointed out in the past, until the shirt is being held up and the ink is dry and they're playing for their new team, it isn't done. And that does frustrate a lot of the people involved because the reporting often front runs the reality. But in many of these cases, you are reporting accurately and hopefully always the reality at that moment in time. But we'll come back to that later. We were talking about Kiss Chase in the playground.
we were. So it went from there and obviously then into journalism. How did you end up in this crazy world of the transfer business and social media? And
I'll just pick up on where we were actually. So I always had a big ambition to like play football, and I was decent, and I got spotted for my Sunday team, and Scout came over and handed his business card to me and my dad, and that guy was from Chelsea. So I went down every Thursday night for a year or a season to their then Harlington training ground, which is where QPR train now. And I did training on the old AstroTurf, the sandy AstroTurf. It was horrible. It was actually, one of our coaches was Dave Besant, who was the first choice goalkeeper in the Premier League for Southampton at the time. But he had links to Chelsea, obviously, from the past. And he came down and trained us. And we had a really good group on trial. One of the boys was one of the sons of Mark Hughes. And at the end of every session, you used to go to the back of a minibus and get a Snickers and a can of Lucozade. That was your little treat. And then off you go until next week. At the end of that year, there was a tour to Paris. And if you got a letter inviting you on the tour to Paris, that was not only taking you there, but it would be your invitation to return for another season on trial. And I never received a letter, which I maintain was lost in the post. And that's where the footballing career and the attempts to follow in your footsteps were extinguished. I then was not desperate, but I was keen to be involved in football in some way, shape or form if I couldn't play professionally. And so when you're at school and you start doing work experience, I managed to get to Capital Radio, and Capital Radio at the time had an arm called Capital Gold, who produced the best football radio anywhere, in my opinion, with the likes of Jonathan Pearce and Mark Pugach and so many others. And I loved it. I went in on my weekends after the work experience and learned how radio journalism and football commentary and reporting worked. And from then on, it just proliferated. I went to Bournemouth University, did a journalism degree, fantastic, the BA Honours course down there. Did tons of different spells of work experience at magazines, newspapers, radio stations, television, online, you name it. Match day magazines for clubs, programs, and eventually got onto a traineeship at the Guardian newspaper after a stint freelancing, or just working for free being the optimum word, at Haters news agency, where many of the top journalists have come through, and many journalists full stop. It's a great breeding ground, and they're still going strong. Did other stints at the London Evening Standard, the Sunday Telegraph. My year at the Guardian was amazing. Somehow got on to that traineeship despite being convincing myself I would have no chance. These jobs only go to Oxford, Cambridge students, and that was my preconception. But I managed to come through 2 rounds of interview, and then I was basically just used as a sports reporter: football, rugby, cricket, tennis, and learn the ropes, learn on the job. And when there was no permanent employment there at the end of the 1-year traineeship, that's when I did like Evening Standard, Sunday Telegraph, and then a job came up on the BBC Sport website. Managed to get onto that, and then you'll know from those days, it was based at Television Centre, working on all aspects of written journalism, online journalism, match reporting, interviews, features. You would have the odd opportunity to go and contribute maybe on 5 Live if you had a story, because they were trying to spread the journalism from one platform to another. And I was sort of part of this new wave of journalists as per the course that I did at Bournemouth University, which was multimedia journalism, where instead of having one journalist working for print and one for radio and one for television, you get one who can do all 3 disciplines. And coinciding with that, Gary, was the rise of the transfer market, which got going in 2002. I left Bournemouth University in 2005. And so, the market was sort of gathering momentum. You had guys like Jim White on Sky Sports News with his yellow tie, and it was becoming bigger business. And just the nature of my interest was just to get hold of information, to speak to people, to make connections, relationships, contacts, pick up phone numbers, email addresses, try and find out what's happening. I remember when I was at university in my final year, so it was actually 2006 that I left, my apologies. That January, Theo Walcott was rumoured to be signing for Arsenal. And December 2005 into January 2006, I'd just done work experience at the Southern Daily Echo in Southampton, which was where Theo Walcott was playing. And I remember peppering the main reporter down there, Simon Walter, for information and updates on what was happening in the Theo Walcott transfer. And he kept me posted on what he could. And I just remember the thrill of it all was good fun. And so fast forward to my career, things like breaking news, transfer stories became a bit of a passion. And then it's just proliferated from there.
Yeah, I suppose in many ways, it used to be called, didn't it, the old-fashioned scoop, wasn't it, for newspapers? And it was. But did you ever envisage the world, what it's become now, and social media at that point? You couldn't have, could you?
Well, there was no social media then.
No.
So this was 2006.
So just about starting.
No, and you just had the utmost respect for newspaper journalists. That was all that really existed at that time, who were breaking exclusives. You would pick up the tabloids or the broadsheets and you would see a big story. Or maybe you would go on teletext and see facts. I'll always remember the day when I think it was announced that Arsenal were signing Thierry Henry from Juventus, and like minutes later, it updated with Arsenal signing Davor Suker from Real Madrid, and some of the biggest football stories and sports stories were revealed on that medium. And then television programs like Sky Sports News provided another platform to hear things and see things. I just happened to use the same example here in terms of the club. It was Arsenal when, out of the blue, Sol Campbell was walking through the London Colney training ground live on Sky Sports News, I think, with David Dean. Yeah. It was an Arsenal press conference day, and I remember coming home from school to watch it, but I didn't know, nobody knew it was going to be Sol Campbell's unveiling. So that was what it was at the time. I remember when I was at the BBC, they encouraged us to use something called Twitter in around 2009. And one of our reporters was following the London Marathon, and he was sending posts in to the BBC Sport website that they were then publishing on Twitter, or he was posting tweets and they were using his tweets in the live text commentary. And that was when I started to take note. And people who worked with me at the BBC at the time will remember that I was the most cynical about this. I just thought, what's the point? Why don't you just post on the website? Why do you have to post on this platform?
I think their thinking's changed a little bit about their people tweeting now.
Well, yeah, indeed. Yeah, you know all about that. But so then it was Wimbledon, and I used to cover tennis for the BBC with great pleasure. And I would run around all the outside courts, the practice courts, live tweeting things I was seeing, results, score lines, funny moments, what Andy Murray was looking like in his training sessions, how his injury was. And I would be pretty much courtside at every Andy Murray practice session, live tweeting, and they would pick it up and put it in their live text commentaries. And that's how I started to get into it, social media. And then as the transfer market exploded, it became a way of promoting my stories, and wherever I was in the world, for the BBC or even in my own spare time, I would be doing bits and bobs around transfers. And maybe the big one that really got me going was in 2012. It was I think I know specifically the 24th of August. It's around now, and it was really close to my birthday, which is tomorrow, 28th of August.
Happy birthday for tomorrow.
Thank you. It's always ruined by the transfer window. The 2 years I think it was that the Premier League brought their deadline to before the season starts, like the 7th of August. It was a dream for me. Now it's a nightmare. But was Robin van Persie moving from Arsenal to Manchester United, £24 million, I think it was, in 2012, and that was a scoop that I was able to break on like social media, the BBC Sport website, and I went on television to report it as well. So finally, I felt that I was in this world. I remember a journalist at one of the national papers said to me in my earlier days, maybe around 2008-ish, "What's your biggest scoop?" Almost like that's what he was judging me by. And I just sort of said, I don't know, Peter Crouch is out injured for Liverpool. I had no idea. I'd never done one. And I don't know how you got to the point of doing one. And that's the currency that this journalist seems to be judging me by, and maybe this industry too. And I'm going to have to prove myself with scoops. But then from that, around the time of that Van Persie one onwards, you pick up more contacts, and people respect you when they've seen how you've dealt with one story, and they speak to you more willingly thereafter, and you continue to build your network, and bit by bit, and doing things the right way, and handling things properly, and building a reputation for integrity and quality and accuracy and trust means that you get more and more. And now we're in a world, as you say, which I could never have imagined, where anybody can break stuff on X, on Instagram, on Snapchat, on TikTok, on Facebook, on their websites, on television, on radio, on podcasts. And the proliferation is just scary. And obviously, I didn't mention that on traditional media as well, because there are many scoops broken by brilliant newspaper journalists every day, and they don't get the credit they deserve. But it's unrecognizable. And for me, I'm turning 39 now, so I've been through sort of more than a decade of the sort of traditional way and now the modern way. Whether we like it or not, it's a case of adapt or die. And hopefully I'm an example of how you can adapt and still succeed, having the old school values appropriate for the modern day requirements.
Tell us how, I think everybody's really interested in this. How does it work? How sure do you have to be on your information before you actually go to print or to tweet or whatever you want to call it?
It's a process that has just become my stock and trade. It's the only thing I know. And that was that was learned really at Bournemouth University when I did that journalism course. It was then acquired and developed on stints of work experience, and then it was a rule of the places I've worked: The Guardian, the BBC for sure, and now at The Athletic. And I would like to think every newsroom up and down the country and around the world. Clearly, there are different or no rules when it comes to sort of social media and people with their own websites and influencers and things like that. They're not governed by editorial guidelines, but I am and always have been. So you need to at least double independently source all of your information. And now, of course, there can be conversations to be had if you're, say, speaking to the person who's just resigned as manager of Manchester United, or you're with them or something like that. You're not going to go and check it with somebody that doesn't know. But that's a rarity, or it's never going to happen. So the premise is, at least double independently source all your information. And when we say independently, you can't speak to somebody at a club who is sat next to somebody else at a club. You speak to both of them, and you go back to your editor and you say, I've got two. If you're speaking to somebody at one club, you then need to speak to somebody at another club, or a governing body, or the person themselves. And these sources, it could be a player, it could be a parent, a sibling, a family member, and then all the way up to the kit person, a medic, a director, a sporting director, technical director, chief executive, owner, manager, coach,
there are
press
spies
officer.
Everywhere.
There's and you often don't know. It could be somebody that you come across in your daily life, a dentist or a postman, or
so you'd listen to a dentist. If a dentist said to you, "I've just heard that Miami is signing Messi," you go, "Oh right," you take that on board, or then you go, "Well," because you must hear a million rumours, and as we all do.
Maybe it was the dentist that gave me the Miami cap.
That's what came to my mind. The M's there.
Yeah, it was. No, so the Athletic did an advert a few Christmases ago. Any source is a source, and the essence is true. So a tip, a bit of information can come from anywhere, and I respect that at every level. And I have conversations with people at non-league clubs in different countries, organizations, governing bodies, players, agents, you name it, and I'll take that with the same seriousness as I would speaking to the head of a governing body or a club. But but that information then needs to be like confirmed
Yeah.
properly with the people involved, if they're doing a deal or if it's involved in an injury or a new contract. Not just like two people anywhere. It has to be at least two people who are privy to it and have firm information on it. And then after that, you try and get more. You know, that's at the very least. You try and get more detail because things may have changed or might be slightly different. And then at the end, or towards the end, you go and speak to the club, to the communications officer, the press officer. Depending on how well you know them, you may go quite early in the process if you trust them and you can work together before publication. Some maybe you don't know so well, or they may want to publish it themselves once they know that you're onto a story, or they might try and stop a story or not tell the truth about a story. And so maybe you leave that until the last moment and basically just tell them that you've sourced it properly and you're going to go with it. With me, most of the communications directors and things I've got good relationships with that I've built up over time, and they know that I won't go to them unless I fully checked everything through and got it absolutely on the money. And at that point, sometimes they don't want to cooperate, and that's fine, but most of the time they do, and they sort of say at the very least, thanks for letting us know. Sometimes they object, sometimes they ask for something to be changed, something that you've not got that quite right, could you wait because something's really sensitive, and you try and do what you can to make sure everybody is happy and coexisting.
What's a typical day during the transfer window in your life?
So there's no script. There's no syllabus to anything I do, Gary, in terms of where the stories come from, routine, so my way of getting a story, and a lot of young journalists or peers, even more experienced journalists who I talk to and they ask for advice. I really want to do what you do, or could you give me some tips on how you do it? But it's not what I was trained, or there isn't a training for it. A lot of it is on feel and instinct and experience, and you make errors over time. You try things, you learn from your mistakes, and you sort of plot a way through. So it can be any time, any place, anywhere. And by the way, and it's really important to say this, like on your last point about making sure you're right, like if you're not right, don't do the story. Err on the side of caution. And maybe I've built up a reputation for whenever I do something, it's accurate. But that's because when I'm not sure about stuff, and that's a lot of the time, I just hold back. Don't do it. It's better to take your time and be right than rush it and be wrong. And we're not always 100% accurate, but you can limit it by doing things the right way. And when you lose stories to other journalists or other publications, that's fine. You win some, you lose some. It's the nature of the beast. It's not life and death. In what you're saying about a typical day, I'm not sure if the day exists. It kind of blends into the night. You're up awake in a transfer window, and especially now towards the end, for as long as you need to be. If you can get to sleep a little bit earlier because you've covered all your conversations, there doesn't seem to be that much brewing. The newspapers come out, the first editions come at sort of 10:30, and there's nothing you weren't aware of. Last night I was on Sky Sports News, the Back Pages Tonight program, so you're already in the zone. You have maybe a few more texts and calls. Nothing's really going on. It's the calm before the storm. Get yourself to sleep. Or there was an example a few years ago when Luis Diaz was signing for Liverpool when he was meant to be going to Tottenham, where I started to get the information at like midnight, 1 a.m. And so you stay up through the night, but then you can't check with people that you need to because they're asleep. So you maybe set your alarm for 5 a.m., do a bit more work, wait for people to wake up. So it's pretty much wake up, see what's happened that you've missed in the short time you have been asleep, make some checks with the office. They may be checking stuff with you, read some stuff that you were meant to have read before publication, change some things that you may need to change that's prepared for publication. I always try and exercise really early. So I'll go to the gym, I'll do some fitness, walk the dog, just try and beat the world awake. So get some fresh air, some thinking time when it's quiet, get your exercise done because it's critical to keep your body and your mind in shape, and then crack on. have some breakfast while looking at social media and your work messages and making calls. Keep the ear pods in so that you can eat and text and things at the same time as talking. And then you just bounce between stories. Colleagues need help. You need to break stuff. You need to do podcasts like this. You need to travel to see people, to appear on different things. You need to do the school run. My kids are the most important thing in the world to me. You might try and, I don't know, play a game of paddle tennis during the day, but then not at the moment because it's too risky to lose stories. Evening, the same thing happens. We've got kids football, rugby, cricket, clubs, school pickups. Try and juggle that with stories. Try not to do it while you're driving the car. And then that just continues through the night. There are fits and starts. So there'll always be crazy periods in the transfer window where everything's going off. And it's wall to wall every day, and you're not doing the fitness, and you're not eating like you should, and you're not doing your family commitments. And that happened loads last summer with the Saudi Pro League being so active. But this has been a quieter window, and so it's actually been spaced out quite nicely. And then you get to the deadline.
You must really look forward to the end of the transfer window and getting some sleep, I would imagine.
Yeah, that's always an eagerly anticipated moment in the year. So January, not too bad because it's only a month. The summer is taxing and draining because it's not just that it starts in June. It's really starting in March, April, May as the clubs are getting their plans finalised. And deals are already starting to move. I remember it in particular on the Erling Haaland to Manchester City one. That was gathering pace from February with meetings between City and Borussia Dortmund and his representatives and others. I remember Liverpool and Ibrahima Konate, they lined up before the transfer window. I broke that and then it's just kind of executing it during the market.
Do you ever get clubs call you, David? Do you ever get clubs, like when you say I broke that story, do you ever get clubs going on complaining that you broke the story too soon, you've killed it, or does anything ever happen like that, or do they just accept now this is the world and how it is?
I'm really particular and methodical in my process, and I don't like to be in a position, and I've learned from mistakes over the years where you're getting the phone call afterwards complaining at how you handled something, what you said, how you said it. That mortifies me. I was once in the gym after doing a story the next morning, and I was really happy with myself because I thought I'd done it all properly, and someone called me up absolutely raging, and from that moment on I've taken a different approach where I do every single check and turn over every stone before that piece is published, and that means that everyone knows it's coming. Even if they don't like it, they've had the chance to contribute, to add a right of reply, to have their say, and nobody can... They can still be shocked by the strength of the public reaction to a story, but I even say to them, literally, I don't want you coming to me afterwards and complaining, speak now or forever hold your peace type thing. And that has served me really well. But yes, so... Looking forward to the end of the window for sure. It does leave a bit of a vacuum though, Gary, because you've been absolutely immersed in this every minute of every day, and then it shuts, and very quickly the industry moves on. Your editorial desk, your team, your colleagues, your bosses, the public. There'll be matches. So I'll be at Old Trafford on Sunday. It'll be Man United against Liverpool. There'll be a bit of chatter about what happened in the transfer market, but then it will all be about that match and the weeks ahead. And then there's an international break, and everyone will be looking at Lee Carsley and how he's going to do with England. I've got a stag do to go on in that period. Like, life gets back to normal, it changes, and then you start to sort of, you've really got to rest and recuperate and look at other stories and interviews and features to keep yourself busy and rest, crucially, and then you go again in January. So it's kind of like a conveyor belt.
Yeah, it's an incredible business, isn't it? Why has this window perhaps been not quite as active as last time? As you mentioned, the Saudi League, and that was... Have they gone quiet? Have they lost a little bit of the interest, do you feel? Or
no, so there are a few things that have gone on with Saudi. mainly that they did all of their heavy lifting in the summer of 2023. They had squads to fill as part of this ambitious new project, and it was remarkable what we saw. We didn't even see that with the Chinese Super League, which did go on a spending spree, but not to this extent in terms of the amount of money that was committed and the sort of cast list of names that the SPL have attracted. The MLS has never done that either in the States. It's been a more organic growth. And so most of the squad slots were filled last summer. And that meant that coming into this window, I was told very clearly that it would be a sprinkling of star names across the league, and then trying to build more organically for a sustainable future by bringing in top young players from around the world, because they increase the number of places available for 21 and under signings to encourage and sort of fuel that youth development. So I knew it wasn't going to be the same. As it has gone on, I've been surprised by the lack of activity, and I think there are other reasons too. I think, there's a difficult situation, you could say, between the clubs going and doing negotiations and spending themselves, but the league, the central body, kind of, they're supposed to be running it, that they were at the heart of it all last summer. And there was a bit of this, who's doing the talking, clubs are off doing this, the league's off doing this, but loads needed to get done and did. Whereas this summer, not so much needs to get done. And there is that, who's in charge here, the league or the clubs. And that's created maybe a bit of politics and a bit of a difficult situation. And there's still a bit of time, so let's see what happens. But I think the Saudi project is very proud, and it doesn't want to just be seen as this bottomless pit of money that is going to continue spending, which some could say recklessly, they would say necessarily initially, and solving the problems of the Premier League clubs and of European counterparts who desperately need the Saudi Pro League to bail them out of financial trouble, to be that crutch to solve and cure all ills, that they want to be recognised in their own right. So this project moves on, but the shift in dynamic and the reduced spending has had a dramatic impact on the Premier League and Europe, because spending is down. There's not been the same flow of players, and even deals like Ivan Toney, which is still alive at the time we speak. I think it might go down to the wire.
Where do you think he'll end up? And we'll reiterate here that we are doing this on Tuesday, so if it's broken subsequently, you'll understand. But I mean, if you get it right, David, it'll look really good.
Yeah, it's the crystal ball that we all wish for. So the only proposal really on the table as we speak is from the Saudi Pro League. And Al Ahly for Ivan Toney, which is fairly remarkable.
Surprising,
given all the
I would have thought.
Months and years of links to Arsenal and Man United and Chelsea and whoever else. And it is surprising because Ivan Toney's a top quality player. Obviously had the difficult situation around the gambling ban. He's just featured for England at Euros. But the fact is that nobody's come to the table with the sort of money that Brentford want. As we speak, that still hasn't been agreed with Al Ahly and the Saudi Pro League. They've also got to agree on personal terms as well. There's a very good chance it will still happen, but it's not guaranteed. And don't forget that he's a year away from becoming a free agent. And so, of course, Brentford want and need to do the deal now. They don't want to lose him for free, but he still has it within his gift to walk out on a Bosman in the summer of 2025 and then have a much bigger pick of clubs that he could join without a transfer fee.
Who do you think in the next 3 days, who's the most likely to a big transfer to happen? Someone like Marc Guéhi, everyone's interested in him, Newcastle in particular, it appears.
I can see the Marc Guéhi deal happening. Again, at the time of recording, it's at a delicate place because the door has not been closed. Crystal Palace have rejected a number of bids, but I don't think the last one was neither rejected nor accepted. And so there's a bit of wiggle room there. He's within the last 2 years of his contract. Newcastle are offering in and around £65 million. Huge amount of
Ooh.
I've just got to take this
It's
quickly.
an important call. It could be Marc Guéhi. David, little scoop for us there.
That was about Scott McTominay. And given this is going out later
Friday,
in the week,
yeah.
I can say what I've been told, and that he won't be travelling over to Naples, I should say, just yet, because he still has to finalise his agreement and approve contractual terms with Napoli. So I think the Manchester United element is done now, which was something that was outstanding between McTominay and the club, but now he has to finalise everything to complete this proposed move. So that's what that call was about.
Yeah, it's an incredible world that you live in. You've given us a little glimpse of it there in, 40, 45 minutes, whatever it is, with all these calls and interruptions. I mean, you must be constantly on your phone. I heard it going again there. We'll wrap it up so you can get on with your work in just a minute. I can see why they call you what was it? The Ornacle, wasn't it? Where did that come from? Because you're always right.
Well, yeah, obviously it's a play on the word oracle, and I find that all quite embarrassing. But the funny thing was, as the transfer market and reporting around it proliferated, and I used to do these stories, people created loads of memes. I wasn't really aware of it at the time, but then the problem was they were starting to be sent to relatives with the same surname, and there would be like a cereal box, cornflakes, superimposed with my face saying like Ornflakes, or in the movie The Bourne Supremacy, suddenly had my head on the gun and it was like the Orn Supremacy, and stuff that was slightly less decent for me to say on this podcast too.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah.
so it kind of took on a life of its own, but it's all complimentary, which is lovely, and I really am very grateful for that, because the amount of people you speak to in the public, and there's so much, as you know, like horrible stuff going on social media and in mainstream media and in the world, full stop. And my experience is like almost 100% positive. I only have like really polite and respectful interactions most of the time. There's occasional aberrations on social media. People grateful for the news, the way in which I go about it and report it, and the professionalism that I try to exhibit at all times. And that's helped me have a good relationship with like clubs and organizations and individuals involved. And I try and build that every day. And also I've got so much admiration for the other journalists doing the same, of whatever level, or regional, national, international. It's not easy, but it's part of an entertainment and information industry where people do a pretty good job, and it's not the most important thing in the world.
But I'm sure it's become a competitive world. I'm going to let you go, but before you do, a little bird tells me that you once caddied on a golf course for Alan Shearer. Is that true?
That's part of my sporting journey, yeah.
What was he like? Was he miserable?
Well, it was really funny actually, because I lived around the corner from the Burnham Beeches Hotel, and as you know, England used to stay there while training at Bisham Abbey, and I used to go with friends, and we heard about previous kids from our school, Burnham Grammar School, who used to go down to get autographs, to get photos with the players, with the staff, and even sneak onto the Burnham Beeches Golf Club. On the second hole, you could park your bike up and jump through the woods and run onto the course. And apparently a kid like caddied for an England player, and we thought impossible, but we were told, no, try it yourselves. So we did. We parked up our bikes in the bushes, scrambled down there. When we saw the coach was leaving the hotel, we had binoculars on to see that they were packing the coach with golf clubs, the likes of David Seaman, Ian Walker, Alan, Peter Beardsley, Robbie Fowler, Kevin Keegan as manager, and so on. And yeah, so as soon as the bus left, we scrambled, shot down to the woods, left our bikes, ran onto the course when we saw this sort of platoon of red polo shirted men walking up the second. And once I did it, and it was for Robbie Fowler. I said, can I caddy for you? And he said, yeah. And I took his bag round. I think we only did 9 holes, and he gave like a £20 note and a Mars bar at the end of it, and off you go. And then the second time round, because the first time worked, it was the captain. It was Alan Shearer. I think he was the captain, unless Tony Adams was at the time, but he was the main striker.
All I want to know is what was his tip?
Oh, the 10:30 at Ascot. So he said and he was an absolute gentleman, and I've had the privilege to work with him since at BBC and the Athletic, but he was so nice. He was talking about his holidays with Rob Lee, because obviously close family, friends, etc. And it was incredible. He's really good at golf as well. And what did he give me at the end? I think he gave me a £20 note, and then was like, "Get out of here before the security throw you out." I think Teddy Sheringham was there. The funniest story, and Teddy will probably kill me for this, that at the time, the mobile phones that you guys had, if it left a voicemail, it would often
be hacked by one of the newspapers.
No, probably. It would play the voicemail out loud, like some house phones do, or did at the time. And I was in a round with, I think it was Alan and Teddy and a few others, and I think Teddy had put his bag down and was either off in a bunker or in the woods. And his phone rang, and I was like, "What do I do here?" And I just left it. So it went to voicemail, and the voicemail played outside. The voicemail played out loud, and it appeared to be a female companion waiting outside the front door of his house in London for him to open up, or Essex, or wherever he lived at the time. But clearly he was in Buckinghamshire and upstaged that female companion. Yeah. Anyway, I was sent on my way. I'll always remember the side of the coach was open, the undercarriage for them to pack their kit into, and I saw this pair of Umbro boots, and my eyes just lit up, and I was like, "Is this the moment where you just like commit crime? Go and take those boots. That would be amazing." And the bus driver just walked down and said they were Scholes's, and I was like, "You can't touch Paul Scholes's boots. He wouldn't have let me anyway." So. No. The rest is history. The rest is football.
There you go. What a way to finish. David, thank you so much for your time. It's been so insightful, and good luck for the remainder of the window, and check your phone.
I will do now. Thanks, Gary.
Okay.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you very much. That's it for this week's Friday episode of The Rest is Football. Thank you for listening. Goodbye from me.